and every conversation bring us closer to a healthier mind. And today I have my special guest. He's a board certified emergency medicine osteopathic physician and a dual degree in philosophy, none other than Dr. Dana Cowles. Welcome back, Mr. Dana, to
Well,
one
thanks
of
for
my
having me.
podcasts. Yes, with pleasure. Thank you. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Absolutely. I'm Dr. Dana Cowles. I'm a board certified ER physician, and I've been working in the Florida and New York markets for about the last 20 years now.
Yes, and thank you so much for being part on Mental Health 101, spreading awareness through men. Because our topic for today, mental health awareness for men. Let's start with the biggest barrier, Mr. Dr. Dana. Why has toughing it out become the default setting for so many men's mental health? And what is the mentality actually costing us on a personal and societal level?
I'm sorry, why is what the barrier?
Yes, what's the barrier? Why toughing it out become the default setting for so many men's mental health? Why it's not mentally actually costing us a personal and societal level?
Well, one of the things that has cost people the most is our perspective and which direction we drive. And as far as being able to deal with emotions or being able to handle things in society, one of the biggest barriers is that we actually stifle. And we need to make sure that there's the possibility of expression, but we have developed a culture now where people have learned to stifle and just go along to get along. And that's caused a large root of the problem. We have a perspective where the most important thing, if I ask people what they want out of life, they'll tell me that they want happiness. And happiness has come about from marketing because it parts you with your money. That's why if you go to a business, they want to give you a survey to see if you are happy with your service, because they want to make sure that you're going to continue spending money with them. And there
Mm.
has been a drive to push towards euphoric happiness as a goal in life, where what people really need is security and affirmation. They need to know that things are going to be okay and that they're a good person in the process. So, working in the emergency room, one of the things that always intrigued me the most is if people were pursuing happiness, the best thing that I could tell them is that if they had abdominal pain or chest pain, your tests look normal, they look good. And when I tell them that, a lot of times people will get upset. They get mad. How can that
Mm-hmm.
be? How could this be normal? And what they're actually telling me is that they want to know that they're going to be okay. So it's important to have a tackleable problem. Men in particular are problem solvers. So they don't want to just look at something and say, well, it is just to be right. So they want to have a tackleable, solvable problem. And the second thing is that affirmation. They want to know it's not just in their head, that they didn't just imagine this pain or this discomfort that brought them into the emergency room in the first place. And another question that I ask people, if your pursuit is happiness, if what you want out of life is happiness, why do you get into political fights with random strangers on the internet? That's not a pathway to happiness. So what they're actually doing is arguing against themselves. It's a wall of anonymity. So if somebody makes an argument, they want to see, is it obliterated in the first 5 seconds? And if it's not, if it can hold on its own weight, then people will hold on to that argument more stronger. But what they're not doing in that discourse is having an understanding of the other side, or to see where somebody's coming from or why they got to that position.
Interesting, Dr. Dana. We often hear the phrase men don't talk, but is it that the way they don't, or they don't,
It,
or they don't know how to talk about feelings in a way that feels safe, constructive? What does a productive talk look like, Dr. Dana?
I think it depends on who they talk to, and you'll see that there's a reason that men talk to men easier than they talk to women, because their perspectives are different and what they want out of it is different. And so two men talking together generally are two problem solvers, and they try to work an angle to get to the root of the problem and to solve the problem. Women can be problem solvers as well, but they do it to a certain level or degree. And so in the communication aspect, there's anticipation, there's trying to get to an understanding of somebody from their own perspective rather than hearing what that person's perspective is. And I know that for most men that I know of, and myself included, if I'm not being understood in what I'm saying, or what I'm saying is causing a riffle, and then I will tend to just kind of stifle it down. I won't have that conversation with somebody if it's not fruitful and kind of movement right in that moment. And the one thing that people have to understand is that everything in life comes at a cost. And if you're not aware of the cost and paying that cost, then you're going to accrue interest. And if you're not paying the cost or accruing interest, someone else is paying for it for you, and they will eventually get tired and stop. And this is true of finances, but also emotional well-being and the status quo, right? So think about it. If you're angry about something and you don't want to pay the cost because having that conversation is going to burden the relationship, or maybe it's socially inappropriate. You can't deal with it at the time because you're out in public, or it's just socially inappropriate. Maybe you're at work or whatever. And so you stifle that down. Well, you're going to accrue interest. And if you accrue enough interest, by the time it does come out, it's fury, it's an explosion, right? And so that's why everything that happens emotionally is actually a tool for you to use. And you have to make sure that you utilize that tool rather than just stifling it down and accruing the interest. And then there's some people who have someone else paying for it for them, and that's how codependent relationships come about. Or people are enabling, to try to stifle or to dissipate someone's emotional well-being. Well, they'll eventually get tired and stop, so they might leave, or change the situation. And it also happens with kids, right? Like, kids need to learn how to pay the costs in life and deal with their emotional well-being instead of having the parents take care of it for them. One of the biggest examples recently is bullying at school. And they tell the kids, don't deal with the bullying. You need to tell someone else. And that other person is going to pay the cost for you, right? They take care of the situation. But when you get to have your kids be 18 years of age, you usher them out into the world and say, okay, you're going to move on now. But the question is, did we pay all their costs for them, or did we teach them how to handle life and situations, right? Did we take care of that for them or give them the skill set? And the difference in that is, if you get tired and stop and say, now you got to do it on your own and leave them in the world without a skill set, then they're not going to be able to function appropriately. And they're going to struggle with that for a long time, if not the rest of their life.
Dr. Dana, if you could permanently redefine one aspect of traditional masculinity to better support men mental wellness, what would it be and why?
I would say that the biggest thing for mental health awareness for men would be to recognize that we are generally problem solvers, and to understand that brute force is rarely the solution for problem solving. There's almost always a better way than just physical movement. And so, we or I have in the past tended to handle things directly, straightforward, try to push forward on something. And if it doesn't work appropriately, just utilize a little more force, and it's there's other ways to get your point across or to be able to deal with the situation than just general brute force, and so um I look at now like political discourse on the internet or even just in society, and people try to make their point and try to, you know, um, get their ideas across. And when they're not received well, they tend to get louder, or more forceful, or maybe start getting derogatory and start name calling or start, whatever. And it just devolves the conversation. So, generally speaking, there's always a better way to be able to get your point across or to do things. One of the
Mm.
things also that I think is very important in life is to build, grow, and develop. I'm a firm believer that that's why we're on this planet is to build, grow, and develop. And fear is the one thing that stands in our way of building and growing, right? And so if we learn to use fear as a tool rather than something to avoid or run away from, we can build, grow, and develop a lot easier. And so if I could change one thing in society, it would be stop talking about what we're against. Stop criticizing and trying to knock other people down, but build, grow, and develop. I always want to hear what people are for. What are they in support of and what do they want to build, grow, and develop? Not to just criticize and knock somebody down for their point of view or what pathway they're going.
Very well said. Dr. Dana, very well said. Let's talk about the identity pressure and expression. How does the pressure to be consistent provider, protector, or rock for a family directly conflict with the natural human experience of vulnerability, fear, and uncertainty?
Well, I think the pressure of constantly providing is a little bit of a misnomer, but it's something that is put out there in people's minds that they have to always have a solution for every problem. One of the things that happens for us in medicine is that there's a timeliness aspect, right? We're not going to have the answers right away, and you have to have your expectations set in the right spot. So, like if I was dealing with someone with pain control, you know, the goal is never to 100% eradicate pain. A lot of times that's impossible, right? So, what we have to understand is that you have to be able to move things to a certain position at a given time. So, if I'm going to evaluate someone's pain control, I don't want to eradicate it completely, but I have to have a realistic goal, such as are they able to sleep? So if I was giving somebody a pain medicine and I would be asking, would you be able to sleep right now? If the answer to that is yes, then the pain is adequately controlled at that time. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
same thing with problems in life or a situation or even providing. You have to set an expectation of what you're going to be able to do at any given time and to understand it's not always the time to react. Right. So, one of the things
Yes.
that I do tell people is if it's not a fact, don't react. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
we will get information that comes at us at any given time that says, okay, this is a problem. This is what's going on. Okay, well, first of all, is it a fact? If it's not, I'm not even going to react to it, right? If it's just innuendo, hearsay, whatever, and there's a lot of times that when I'm at work in the emergency room, they'll tell me, hey, something is potentially happening, or, we've got an ambulance coming in and this person's critical and they've got this and that, happening. And the anxiety builds a little bit, and you're like, oh, this could be problematic. It could be real dangerous. It could be whatever, right? And then I get there and I find out that's nowhere close to the case, right? So it's not, if somebody wasn't as bad as what they initially thought, or maybe you had somebody that was panicking instead of, clearly dealing with a situation, right? So when they get in, I find out it wasn't as critical as what we initially believed it to be. Well, that means that I might have spent some time in anxiety for no reason, right? And so if it's not a fact, don't react. And to understand, you don't need to 100% solve every problem right away. So there's if there's a situation that comes up it's very sufficient to say, I need more information. Or maybe I'm going to table that issue for a little while until I have enough information to actually make a decision.
Again, very well said, Dr. Donna. So, anger is often a primary acceptable emotion for men to express. In your experience, what a deeper, more vulnerable emotion is the anger most commonly masking?
Well, I mean, it can be masking anything, but anger itself is okay to have, and any emotion is okay to have. The question is whether you react to it or not, and what action does that mitigate? So, expression of that is one thing, but reacting or acting on it is inappropriate in most times. So, what you want to do is make sure that if you have any emotion whatsoever, you need to gather the information because that emotion itself is a tool, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
something that's there to help protect you and something for you to be able to deal with, like fear and anxiety, is a tool that means we need to slow down and pay attention. Anger itself is a frustrated expectation that's not met, and so what you need to do if you feel an emotion is gather information. There's so many people that will blindly react off of something emotionally, and they don't have enough information of where it came from or why, which if you're going to problem solve, you need all that before you can make any kind of decision. And as far as happiness is concerned, like real happiness, I would say that the best way to increase your happiness is to increase your decision options in life, right? So if you're
Mm-hmm.
making a decision on which way to go, okay, then you should always be looking for which direction would provide you the most options. And there's a lot of times we paint ourselves into a corner, by taking something that looks appealing but doesn't have a lot of options left. And then we get cornered, boxed in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, an example might be going for a job, and the job doesn't have a lot of alternatives to it, you know. So if you have one choice where a job will lead you to a lot of other options, or one that is just kind of, focal, it would probably be advisable to take the one that has a lot of options and a lot of ability for movement. Because if you take one that doesn't have a lot of ability for movement, maybe a smaller company, maybe a whatever, then if it doesn't work out, that's going to cause you problems, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
going to get frustrated. However, if on the same aspect, your smaller company is going to lead to other jobs or networking connections that would be more important for you, or gives you more flexibility of time so you have more ability to do things on your non-working time, then that might be the more advisable one. But if you're going to make a decision, you need to make it based on whichever one provides you more options. Anybody that plays chess competitively would understand this right away. You always want to make the move that increases the number of options that you have, and don't box yourself into that corner.
Dr. Donna, let's talk about the reframing strength and building skill. How can we rebrand strength to include self awareness, emotional regulation, and asking for help rather than just stoicism or twisting the endurance?
Well, the one thing that I learned growing up in wrestling a lot was to utilize leverage and strength means to stand tall. And I try to teach this to my own children if they're dealing with bullying or they're dealing with anything. The important thing is to stand tall, and that's where real strength comes in.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great story from the guy who does the voice acting, and his brother was in the special forces, and so he said that when his brother had come home and he was going to go for a new voice part, and he said, I'm going to voice a truck, and so he said, well, what is that? And he goes, well, it's actually a military type truck, and he's going to be a leader and, a general or whatever, and so he said, well, do me a favor, don't do that all out aggression that they do on TV where strength is portrayed as,
Mm-hmm.
and so he said because of that, he learned that strength of standing tall, and he deepened his voice and he made it more powerful. And that's when he became Optimus Prime, and it was a great story because it shows that, like, if you lean forward and move forward, that's aggression. If you go backwards, you're retreating. That's weakness. The real strength is just standing tall, being able to stand firm and stand your own ground. And so there's a story in the Bible of, the meek will inherit the earth, and who are the meek, right? The meek are the people who have strength and have capability and know when to put it in check. To be able to stand tall with strength in the fact that you don't need to be violent, you don't need to be weak and passive, but you can stand tall and firm. And I think that's a lot of the rebranding that, now we hear about toxic masculinity and all these kind of things. And then you have other people who want to back down and be passive on everything. But the real strength is standing tall and firm.
Dr. Dana, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and of course, my book 101 review in sixth season as well, comedy 101 third season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101 love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 our fourth season, science 101, sex 101 third season, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Dr. Dana, looking forward, what gives you the most hope about the future of men's mental health? What positive shift are you seeing in this younger generation?
Well, I think people are becoming more understanding of where the problems lie, and that we're getting more awareness of what real strength is. And I think as people progress and grow and learn, develop, we can avoid a lot of the pitfalls that are there. One of the things with COVID, especially, was watching the community come together. The volunteers for the studies, for the trials, the companies who adjusted their production to make better things that were needed in the hospitals, to watch the communities react to each other in a way that they can minimize the amount of spreading the disease, and all that put together got us through a huge crisis right away, and that's the kind of strength of cooperation that I think is going to lead us to a much brighter future. I like the phrase "business over bullets." It's one of the cooperation and the interaction with people is going to be salvation.
Well, Dr. Dana, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or wherever you want to promote on Mental Health 101?
Well, for sure. You can reach me on CowlesEmergencyServices.com, COWLES, emergencyservices.com, and I'm available for public speaking if anyone's interested, and I'm going to have a couple of books coming out. So they're in production right now, and look forward to that coming. But most important, support my friend Daniel Lucas, like and share.
Yes, people, let's support Dr. Dana Cowles, because if you support him, for sure, more and more empowering books will rise, more empowering advocacy for sure will be implemented. And I have one more question, Dr. Dana. If you could leave our listeners with one actionable, non-overwhelming step to improve their own mental health or support a man they care about, what would it be?
If you want to support people that you care about, the number one thing is to look for pattern changes and changes in behavior. If you talk about something like suicidality or significant depression, a lot of people won't tell you because they don't want their plans to be stopped. But what they do is they change their behavioral pattern. So if you're worried about your kids, you're worried about your family, your friends, coworkers, or anything like that, watch the behaviors. And if it changes for any reason, like somebody who's usually sedentary goes on a big exercise kick, or somebody's stuck just starts giving away a lot of their things, or somebody who's usually sad starts telling jokes and is really happy all the time, all of a sudden, or vice versa, somebody who's always telling jokes is not doing that. Any behavioral pattern that you see, don't be judgmental about it or accusatory. Just go to the person and tell them, hey, how's it going? You know, what's happening in your life? I'm interested. We haven't caught up in a while. Can we talk? Okay? And it's that kind of openness to show that you've got support, but also that people are interested in interacting will get people to talk. And at least they get things going from their emotional state to the logical state. And that kind of clarity that they might not be able to achieve on their own makes a world of difference. So watch for the behavioral pattern changing. And if it happens, very non-judgmentally, just say you want to talk to the person. How's everything going and what's happening in life?
Dr. Dana, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Monica people, see you soon.